Hey there, it's Quinn with PTSD while black, doing a little bit of a check-in. I know it's a long time no talk, but this past week on March 11th marked the 1 year anniversary of the loss of a dear, sweet, wonderful little pet, my uh, kitty. And yeah, I thought I would take the time off to grieve, take the time to allow myself to feel my feelings instead of appearing on social media. And it's been really helpful because with the experience, and hi there to whoever's watching, with the experience of the gang stalking situation, those folks, I spent a lot of time dealing with their judgments of my grief. They thought that my crying was a sign of weakness. And I'm like, grief is just real, regardless if it's a person or a pet, or for some people, a plant. But I'm not here to judge it. I'm not here to judge it. But I just wanted to talk about how it's changed over time for me, especially with the brain injury. It's just made death so much more different and so much more real and painful. And so I just have to accept that I kind of have this brain that looks at death in this way of it's a real loss, it's a real separation. And what I've kind of gotten to learn about myself in this past couple of weeks is for a long time, I was not allowed to grieve. I was always told to stop crying if I felt sad. Even though my grandmother died when I was 5 years old, my grandfather, I think he died when I was 8, and an uncle died, I think when I was 9. I want to say he was around during fourth grade. But so I had a lot of deaths of significant family members. Like my grandparents were primary caregivers when my mom was at work. So that's actual loss and it's worth crying over. But what I realized with my relationship with death, what I tend to do, well, let's start at the beginning. Grandma dying at 5 when I was 5 years old. I blamed myself for not eating my peas at dinner time when she died in a car accident. Um, that I was mad at her for making me go outside and to try to use an outhouse in the dark at 5 years old. And I was too afraid. Instead, I went to a tree to use the bathroom, and she sent my cousin out to pull up my pants in the middle of the act and made me sit at the dinner table with mess in my pants and eat the rest of my dinner. Um, until my mom came home and my mom had to deal with the mess. So that was a trauma at 5 years old. And I was so angry with my grandmother um, that I thought that when she had the car accident, it was because I was mad at her. And so that was internalized. And I think that's where I had the first example of internalizing grief and not allowing myself to process the loss and not allowing myself to say that I miss this person, even if they were abusive towards me. Um, and I'm learning now at 41 years old, after having dealt with many other losses, that it's perfectly natural to grieve death. My mother was a nurse, working in nursing homes and in senior living facilities, and she saw death all the time. And she would come home and talk about, oh yeah, this resident died, and this is what it looked like. This is what the experience was. And I'm a little kid hearing this. And so that really shaped kind of a more of a callous view towards death, or a scientific view towards death, um, where I really still wasn't allowing myself to process it. And so I, as a child, thought the best way to deal with death was to become a master of it, especially after losing those significant relatives at such a young age. So I became what you would now call goth or emo. Um, I was that before it was popular. It was more of like an obsession with death and with not belonging and the other side and loss, an obsession with loss. I felt that if I studied it, if I became curious about it, then I could have some sort of power over it. Yeah, that I could have power over death. And what I was doing instead was not allowing myself to feel my full range of feelings about loss. That it's okay to feel some kind of way. And this was, I think, one of the earliest examples for me of trying to achieve power without having understanding. And so this week, if you fast forward to, okay, we'll fast forward that I had a concussion in 2016 that kind of forced me to deal with those feelings. Um, the concussion, it's on the left side of my head, um, caused me to deal with um, emotions. There's emotional imbalance that I experience now. There's like emotions are much more intense, more intensely represented. And so when there's grief, sadness, and loss, it's very intense for me. It's extremely real. And I have to feel it. And I had lost, I think since 2016, I lost a friend who was in a cabaret group. She died during childbirth, and that just broke my heart. My poor husband snoring back there. He's got a cold. Um, my friend died during childbirth, and so when I think of her, when I see her picture, when I sing a song that she sang with me in the group, it hits my heart, and I just cry. Um, I had another friend who died of breast cancer, and most recently, the loss of a pet, the loss of a grandmother-in-law, and the loss of an aunt. And with all of these things, I felt the full range of grief, of wailing and crying and just allowing it out because I don't know how to process it. Especially with a brain injury, not being able to process words. It's having that as a challenge. It's like you need to get this out of your body, Quinn. Um so I have just had to let myself feel all of my pain, which is something that I denied. The scars on my arm is from self injury from ages 11 to 22, I think 22, 21. And that was how I processed the grief because I wasn't allowed to cry. And if I was angry, I was told to get over it. So there's still this need of getting it out. And as a child, the solution was, oh, punish myself because I've made people uncomfortable. But really, it was a release. It was a release. And now know that it's just natural to need that release. It's 100% natural, 100% valid. And it's not to make other people responsible for my need for release, but for me to acknowledge how I feel. And I laugh at some of the absurdity of the things that I used to do. I mean, I would study death to the point of like looking at autopsy videos. And well, before there were even autopsy videos, what was that? There was this website that would have pictures of crime scenes and things of that nature. And I would just study that and just try to understand what death was like and to not be afraid of it and be like, wow, that's cool. That's interesting. But I'm really learning today. It's because I had no expression over it. I had no language around it. So I'm kind of just giving myself this ability to go, okay, okay, you've experienced this loss, and that your feelings are real and valid, and that you get to express them, which is something that, like, my family of origin did not have available to give to me. Um, yeah. So I'm having to reparent the little inner goth kid um, to let her cry. So with my cat who passed away, um, he was my little sunshine. I just want to talk about him for a moment. He, okay, when we went to adopt him in 2010, when we were looking for cats, we go to this adoption facility and they open the door, and this cat is standing right at the door. He had escaped from his cage and was right at the door when I came. He's like, "Hey, what's up? Let me give you the grand tour." When I held him, he would play with the crystal that at the time that I had was like this a large um clear quartz crystal on a bat necklace, and he was just playing with that and chewing it. And I'm like, okay, this is my cat. This is my guy. Um, so he chose me. He chose me. And when my husband and I had first moved in together, we had made this adoption of pets as kind of like our commitment in a way. Which I had always lived alone and would not adopt pets because I was like, I'm going to move every single year when the rent goes up. So I don't want to put somebody through that turmoil. And my husband's like, nah, we need to have pets. um, so that was an adjustment. And so having these little, you know, beautiful beings in my life was amazing. And this cat, he he would he would walk me to the bathroom. Show every time I would get up in the morning to go to work, he would walk me to the bathroom and show me where the bathroom was just to make sure I made it okay. He would go through my purse. One time I caught him taking, because I had a Pop Tart for breakfast stuck in my purse, and he was pulling the Pop Tart out. I'm like, yo, bro, what's up with that? Um, he learned how to do tricks. We were able to train him to, when you hear a clicking sound, like to come up and get a treat from your hand. He had to touch your hand in order to get the treat. He was conditioned for that. So it kind of became this way to make a clicking sound when he was doing something that I didn't want him to do, and instead to give him love and attention, or to make the clicking sound and put him in a costume. There had to be a treat for the costume though. He wasn't nobody's fool. Um but he was a smart little guy. We had to get baby locks on all of our cabinets because the cat would be up in your cabinets and trying to get at the pots and pans. We didn't have kids, but we had a cat. And so he was part of our lives for 12 years. We were trying to get pregnant during that time and were unable to conceive. So kind of having this little smartass was our baby, you know. And so I know for people who are like, "Oh my god, you're crying over a cat." But yeah, he was a 12-year-old from somebody who really wanted to have children. I mean, this cat loved when I would twist balloons. He I would bring out all of my balloons, and he would sit there on the bed and just watch me create things. He had to be there for balloon twisting time. He loved magic tricks. You could do magic tricks for the cat, and he'd be like, "Oh, what? How did you make that disappear?" um, he tolerated my singing. My little girl cat just left the room. She's like, "No, thank you." He was good at teaching me boundaries. He was good at teaching me boundaries. Um, when his litter box was not to his liking, he would come to speak to the manager, and look me dead in the eye because I'll be like, "What's going on?" He would cry and he would look me dead in the eye and he pee against the wall, and I'm just like, he only had to do that once. I was like, "Oh hell no, this ain't happening." It's like this ain't happening. This is not acceptable. So he taught me what boundaries were. Here I was living a boundaryless life, and he taught me. He's like, ma'am, no, that litter box has got to get clean. So regardless of whose turn it is, it needs to get done. And he knew to come to me because I was the manager. Because I would tell Daddy, "Hey, Daddy, it's your turn to clean the litter box." Um, so he was a personality. He really was a personality, and was just such a lover and such a sweet, sweet fellow. Um, he didn't like people, didn't like visitors. When they would come, he'd run away. But he did not like me separating from him from visitors either. When I was doing my hypnosis practice at home, I would try to put him in a separate room while I'm working with a client. And he was just like scratching at the door, crying, like, no, 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 no. I've got separation anxiety. I need to be there. I need to know if this is a safe person for you, but I don't want them near me. So he was my baby. And I just really, I miss him. When he was coming to the end of his life, he would always been, he was a big bulking hulk of a cat, big gray kitty. And so I was ignoring the fact that he was losing weight. That was the big key, that something was wrong. And he still had a lot of energy. He was still zipping around. So I didn't think he was ill until one time we were playing with him and he started to have, I noticed that he was having trouble breathing. He was breathing heavily. And I was like, okay, we need to take him to the vet. And it was so funny because that morning he came to me and was resting on my chest. It was kind of like he was saying goodbye. Like he knew I'm not well and I need to tell you goodbye. It was like an emphasis that he wanted to be on my chest in the morning, to see me in the morning. So my husband had to go to work. I took him to the vet, and this is during COVID or post COVID. And they would not allow me to go in with him. So, like, one of my last views of him was them taking him into the hospital and him in his cage just looking at me scared. And he had fluid on his lungs. And his liver was failing. And the first doctor that was in charge had said, hey, we're going to try to tap his lungs and remove the fluid and see if that gives him some relief. And I was like, okay. And I later got a call from another doctor. I was trying to check on the status. I'm like, I'm ready to just bring him home, whatever the condition is. And she's like, I am sorry, but he is suffering. He's in a lot of pain, and it would not be humane to even let you take him home. Basically, what she was telling me after a while was like that basically the procedure that was done on him should not have even been done, really. That he was sick and too far gone. So we had to say goodbye. We did get to hold him. We did get to come in and pet him and give him some treats and hold him. And I held him in my arms as they gave him the injection. And I felt his little life leave. So, yeah, his death did hit me deeply because I held him. I took him to the doctor, and I was the one having to make the decision for him to go through these things while my husband was at work. Of course, I was calling and texting my husband, but so it was a lot. It was a lot to lose this little personality. So I'm allowing myself to take the time to grieve, which, when dealing with the people who initiated harassment, I was putting so much focus on trying to make things right with them that I was not allowing the space for the grief to pay attention to what was really happening with my pet. If I had paid attention to what was happening with him, I would have dropped contact with them and just gotten to love him a little bit more, a little bit longer, play with him one last time, and just hold him like a baby, even though he hated it. But when we were giving him the injection, he'd let me hold him. It's like he knew. He said, "It's okay, it's time, you know?" So, death hits me differently, whether it's large or small, because I recognize that every life has value. And really, when I look at how death hits me, it's because I've spent so much time not paying attention to the value of my own life. And I think there are many of us out there who have done that. But the lesson that I've gotten from this is to recognize the value of my life and the people that are closest to me and to be present with them because nothing is ever promised. Nothing's ever promised. And so all we have are these moments. That's all we got. So I choose to live and be in these moments. That's the lesson that I'm getting from this whole thing. And I'm grateful that I got to have him in my life. I'm grateful he was part of my journey. And I'm grateful for each of the people who have been part of my journey, good or bad. Because either way, they've taught me to value my own life. And that's been a beautiful awakening. All right. I guess I should go. Hair's done. Until next time. Peace.